This is Gemara Menachos, Daf I Pay Gimel. And today's share has been sponsored as an incredible schos Alias Neshama for a very close friend of the Daf. We've been learning together for years, connected with the entire Mishpacha Baruch Hashem. As a schos Alias Neshama for Eliazer Moshe ben Sheiма, B'siyata Deshmaya, the incredible Kayach HaTeira should elevate his Neshama, especially on these Dafim of the Yontif of Pesach, higher and higher, Bigan Eden Shel Maila. We're holding on Pei Beis and Beis, the Daf for the second day of Yontif B'siyata Deshmaya, which you'll see in Mirz Hashem will be loaded well in advance of Yontif. We're holding on Pei Beis and Beis, and all the learning has been dedicated as an incredible schos. Rafua Shalema of Kavriel Simcha, Ben Miriam Ahuva, B'seich Sha'ar Chayla Yisrael. We're holding on Pei Beis and Beis, about 15 lines from the bottom. First word on line is ubitarbitza, a very interesting word. Tarbitza amur. Rashi over here points out this means the beis medrash. So what's the lashon tarbitza? Shemarbitzim boya Torah, that there's a harbotzas Torah, that there is a proliferation. Just very interesting that Taisus over here also opines, just to point out the interesting nature of this word. Who base medrash makav sharbitz b'tarav lashon sheisivu b'rabbanim b'shas. Very, very interesting. Okay, either way, it's going to be a kasha from the base medrash. A two-step hekish is not allowed, which is what the Gemara basically just said. Something that learned from hekish goes and is teaching to a second level of hekish. Says the Gemara, answers the Gemara, Biklali Itmar, who said it as a klal, Pesach, Kule, Chada, Milsahi, and therefore it's not that it was a hekish that learns the secondary hekish, it was a klal, more expansive. Therefore, it's no problem to learn elsewhere. Says the Gemara, now let's go to Rabbi Akiva. For Rabbi Akiva, Pesach Dina Ba'ala Menach Ule Minalei. Where does Rabbi Akiva know the Korban Pesach and all other Korbanos that are Chayvais have to be brought from Chulin? Says the Gemara, Navkolei. They learned in Mi'adam Rishmo Misham Rabbi Eliezer, Zois HaToira. Quoting the pasuk, why does the pasuk say oila? From here we learn now ma'oila tuna kli. I've called on kli. So ma'hi says the Gemara. What exactly is this kli? And again, this could be a little bit of a lengthier drasha that will eventually result in our limud. Says the Gemara ma'hi ilema mizrak. If you're going to tell me it's the bowl used for the Kabbalah Sadam. But by the Zvachim of the Shalmei Tzibor, the communal Shlamim, it also says, Vayasem ba'aganois, and he put it in bowls. And therefore, we already know that it's made in a bowl. So why we need to learn this from the Oila? Ela Sakin. Rather, we must say he's referring to the knife. Vayla Gufa Minolan. And with regard to the knife, where do we know that the shchita requires a knife? Says the Gemara, Gevaldik. So that's the kli. Okay, let's go back to the pasuk. Again, we're trying to figure out Rabbi Eliezer shita. We quoted a lengthy pasuk. So we had started with Ayla. We dealt with what Ayla teaches us. Now we say Menachos, 3 lines on the bottom. Just like the Menachos is only be eaten by the male Kohanim. Says the Gemara, Mai. What exactly? Ask the Gemara. It says that it's only by Zichrei Kuna. Mai. What other karbanos are like the Mincha? Ichatas v'asham. If it's a chatas and asham, and it's also telling me that it's eaten by Zichrei Kuna as we turn over to today's daf. Pei Gimel Amid Aleph, says the Gemara, why would we need this drasha? Bed Yaksiv. It says explicitly, top line Pei Gimel Amid Aleph, Izavche Shalmi Tzibor, Meibur Dikarasi, Bekadshe Kadshim. Where do we see the Ribe Akra? By Zivche Shalmi Tzibor, says the Gemara. Bekadshe Kadshim, Techalena, Kol Zachar, Bekahanim, Yechalasai. So what does this Ribe teach us? Lima, this teaches Al Zivche Shalmi Tzibor, Shenacham Al Zivche Kuna. So you already know this. So what do we need our drasha for? Says the Gemara, Tanai, it's Machlekes Tanai, 5 lines down, Begim Lamed Aleph. Which is interesting. I don't know how common of such a machlekes Tanoim is. It's a machlekes Tanoim purely of mikar, of what is the source. We continue going through the psukim. Chatos, machatos, mikadsham. Bibilua, just as a chatos makes that which is absorbed kadosh through absorption, avkol mikadsha bibalua, so to everything else makes that which absorbed from it kadosh through absorption, through balua. That, for example, explains Rashi, basar shlamim, that absorbs from an asham, which again is the same chumrah of it as a chatos. The shlamim has that degree of kedusha, meaning this is very similar to, we know the basic kashos of milchiks of leishiks. We're on Pesach now, of chametz and matzah. In a similar vein, karbanais would be the same. We continue. Asham, says the pasuk, ma asham. In Shaber V'Shelia Kadeshu, just like Asham in Shaber V'Shelia Kadeshu, the Shaber and the Shelia, the fetus and the amniotic sac are not Kadosh. Avkol in Shaber V'Shelia Kadeshu. So to other karbanos, they're not Kadosh. So says the Gemara on this last point, Kasavar V'Lodais Kadshim Vav Yasan Heim Kedoshim. Rav Eلیעזר learns the fact that it says Asham in the pasuk, which is what we're darshaning, teaches us that the V'ladais become Kadosh when at the moment of their Havyasam, at the moment of their birth, but not prior. And therefore, V'tan and Evsher, Mishi Evsher, and therefore, all Karbanais, will not have Kedusha by the Shapir and the Shilya. Miluim, says the pasuk, ma miluim Meisreyan b'sreifa ve'ein balei chayim Meisreyan b'seifa. Which means that when it comes to the miluim, we have a specific pasuk that we're learning to teach us that Meisreyan, their leftovers are burnt, but in balei chayim Meisreyan b'sreifa. What does that mean in balei chayim Meisreyan b'sreifa? In the case that you can have quote unquote leftovers of a balei chayim, whether that means that an animal was lost and it was subsequently found, etc., etc. We're learning out from miluim that it's only the Meisreyan b'sreifa and not the balei chayim, not if they're alive. Continues the Gemara b'sreifa, says the pasuk. Excuse me. Ma milu Meisreyan b'sreifa and balei chayim Meisreyan b'sreifa. Avkol Meisreyan b'sreifa and balei chayim Meisreyan b'sreifa. Shlamim, continues the pasuk. Says the Gemara, Mashlamim mifalglin umispaglin. Just like when I'm shlamim, it makes other items pigol, and they themselves become pigol. Avkol mifaglin umispaglin. If it touch something else, it becomes pigol, and it itself is pigol. So says the Gemara, Pimasnita Tana, that was all Rabbi Eliezer. We brought this down to understand Shitas Rabbi Eliezer. Says the Gemara, but Masnita Tana Mishmei Rabbi Kiva, he darshan this pasuk slightly differently. Mincha teaches ma mincha mekadeshes bebalua avkol mekdesh bebalua. Same limud. V'yitzrach lemichtav, and now he adds on bechatos v'yitzrach lemichtav b'mincha dikas rachmana b'mincha. I would have thought misham derachicha bal'am. I would have thought that when it comes to the mincha, it is soft. That's why it's more absorbent. Aval chatos, when it comes to chatos, it's not as rochich, it's not as soft. Therefore, ema loy, I would say not. Because rachman bechatos, certainly said about chatos, I would have thought mishad the basar. Because when it comes to the basar of the chatos, I got the shamein kadir, because it's fatty, it's kadir, penetrates deeply. That's why there's these high-level bliois. Aval mincha, maybe a malai sricha. That's what the pasuk got to say, both. Continues the Gemara, Darshting Shittas Rabbi Akiva. 12 lines to the bottom, verse 1 of the line is Ema chatos machatos eina ba. Ela minachulim. Just a chatos only comes to chulin ubiyoim. And it can only be brought during the day. Ubiyadehim anis, chatos brought with the right hand. Av kolina ba ela minachulin ubiyoim, ubiyadehim anos. Ve'chatos gufei minalan. But we know the chatos itself has these halachas that what? The chatos has to be brought from chulin. Says the Gemara, Rav Chisda, the Amarkra. Says the pasuk, V'garav is barachatos, asher loi, and Aaron brings the bowl of the chatos that is his. Loi, mishal loi, v'loi mishal meiser. It has to be yours. Comes from chulin, personal ownership, but not coming from meiser. Biyoim, says the Gemara, how do we know it has to be biyoim? Mi biyoim savasai, nafka. Says the Gemara, Kidei Nazva, Biyoim Savasei Nafka. We already knew it had to be Biyoim. So what's this drasha teaching us? Says the Gemara, you're right. Kidei Nazva didn't really need to say this, just threw it in. Biyodai Manis continues the brayso that wrote Rabbi Kiva say. We learn out from the Chatos as we brought with your right hand. Ask the Gemara, wait. Midirabam. Barbar Chana Nafkodam Rabbar Chana Amar Eish Lakish. 4 lines from the bottom. Kol Mokim Shenemar Etzba Ukahuna Eino El Yamin. Says, you're right, Kidei Nazbo. You're right, this was an extra throw-in. We already knew this. Back to the pasuk, Asham Atzmaisim Mutarin. Just like the Asham, the bones are mutar. Of course, Atzmaisav Mutar. So says the Gemara, so Rabbi Kiva learns out the fact that the pasuk says chatos, that all karbanos are like the chatos, that it comes from chulin. So when we do the math over here, it comes out that we have a machlekes. We have a machlekes, our Mishnah and Rabbi Kiva. Why? Our Mishnah says everything comes from the Karban Pesach. However, Rabbi Kiva seems to argue. So the question is, Rabbi Kiva, Hai v'zavachta Pesach, my ovidle. What does Rabbi Kiva do with the drasha that our Mishnah learned it out from? Explains the Gemara. You know what he does? Sorry about that. Little bit of a crazy highlighting matzif. 1 second. Let's slow down to that highlighter. There we go. You know, you leave the cap of the marker on and you just go across the paper. As the Gemara. So where does Rabbi Kiva learn it out from? My avdile. Mi bayile lichderav nachmin. As we turn over to Beigimel Amid Beis. He needs it for another din of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, Ravu Aminayin. How do you know? Le-Moisar Pesach Shekarav Shlamim. How do you know that the Moisar, the residual, the excess of the Karban Pesach, is brought as a Shlamim? Someone set aside money for the Karban Pesach. He has some money left over. The Moisar Pesach. How do you know it's a shlamim shenemar? V'zavachta bezal Hashem loikechos anu bakar v'haloi ein bezal ba'elim min hakvosim u'min ha'yizim. So why does the pasuk say soin u'bakar? That word bakar is extra. Eli, you know what it tells me? Meiser ha-pesach yehei l'davar haba min hatzoin u'min habakar. That's what you do with the excess money for it. Frak to Gemara, really? V'ha me'acha nafka. You learn out from here, me'vod ishmol nafka. Tichsiv says the pasuk, im min hatzoin karbana l'zevach shlamim. V'yomar avu adishmuel davar haba min hatzoin yeh l'zevach shlamim. So what do we need our Joshua for? Says the Gemara, you're right. You're telling me you learn it from here, the pasuk of Avod Shmuel. We have a third pasuk. Says the Gemara of Tanu into the Brayso, 12 lines down. First one line is Ve'adanya. We learned in a Brayso. Keves. Says the pasuk. Pasuk says Keves the rabbi, it comes to be Marbez the Pesach La'alya. Pesach having the fatty tail burnt on the Mizbeach. Kshehu Omer im Keves. Lavi Pesach, it comes to include a Pesach Shavuot Shnasai that the year passed by. Lavi Shnasai, excuse me, where do we just go? Lavi Pesach. Shavuot Shnasai Ushlamim Haboyim Achmas Pesach. L'chol mitzvah shlamim, for all the mitzvahs of the shlamim, that what? Sheyetanu smicha, unesachem, utenufa chazav v'shaik. Kisheu oimer, so when the pasuk says, v'im eiz, hefsekein, limeid alei, sheino tuna aliyah. So says the Gemara, so comes out, we have 3 psukim teaching us the same din. So responds the Gemara, Tlasa Kroi Ksivi. Really, we end up that we have 3 psukim. 3 psukim that the Moiser Pesach is brought as a shlamim. Ksiv Chad, one of them is Lover's Man of Lover Shanasa. Chad, Lover's Man of Lover Shanasi. Chad, Lover's Man of Lover Shanasi. Meaning, how do you get to the Moiser Pesach? 3 different ways of getting there. One is where over Zmana and over Shanasai. One is over Zmana without over Shanasai. One is when neither have passed. So why the classical Shaila? Why do we need 3 different limudim? Utzrichi. Why? Diashminan over Zmana over Shanasai. Shabdet Chilagamri. Their mamish madchet can't be used at all. Of lover Zmana of lover Shanasai. The Chazi lepesach sheni. Avada, you have the makeup Pesach can be used for Himalay. V'yashmin over Zman of lover Shanasai. Titzchlemi Pesach Rishon Avalay over Zmanai. Avalay over Shanasai. Filu Pesach Rishon Ami Chazi Himalay. Tzricha. That's what we need. All 3 psukim. Hadron Halacha Taidai Sabah. A shortish parak, but a parak certainly needs a chazar. And with that, we dive head forth into the new parak, the 9th parak of Menachos. You already can start seeing the end of Menachos on the horizon, which the truth is, we all know Zvachma Menachos are 1 matbeya, a complete, mixoya. So let's get to it. Says the Mishnah, of course, continuing with the Menachos. Call karbanos hasibur va'yachid ba'im min haaretz. All karbanos, all the grain for the karbanos of the sibur, the public, and the private, come from aretz umechutz la'aretz. The grains come from whether it's inside or outside. Min hachadash min hayashan chutz min ha'imer. Except for the Omer Shtei Alechem, of course, incredible siyat the Shmaya, and second the Yantiv is the Mamish Karban Omer. But okay, I mean, it's all within the season. But either way, Shtei Alechem, Sheina Ba'in El Min HaChadash U'Min HaAretz. V'kulan Eina Ba'in Ela Min HaMuvchar. V'Izah HaMuvchar Shalahem. What's the best? What is the Muvchar Shebahem? Machnis V'Zitcha Alpha L'Soilas. The flowers are Machnis and Zitcha, which we'll see exactly what these are. Alpha, L'Soiles, the foremost of the fine flower. Shni Elem, what's secondary? Afurayim Babika, Afurayim from the valley. Kol Arutz, like Sheirais, Elam Mikane Maviyim, these are the best. So they would bring it from here. And we're going to stop over here. We'll pick it up from the Gemara in the next year, B'siyata Dishmai.